May 1959. In the war rooms of Hanoi, the leaders of North Vietnam made a decision that would alter the course of the 20th century. The partition of Vietnam, established 5 years earlier at Geneva, was solidifying into permanence. The communist insurgency in South Vietnam needed supplies desperately. They required weapons, ammunition, rice, medicine, and reinforcements. But between North Vietnam's industrial base and the battlefields of the South lay a formidable obstacle: the Annamite mountain range. This spine of mountains, stretching over 700 miles along the borders of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, was considered nearly impassable. It consisted of steep limestone formations, dense triple canopy jungle, and rivers that became torrents during monsoon season. There were no roads, and few detailed maps existed of the ancient footpaths used by indigenous tribes. To Western military strategists, moving significant supplies through this terrain seemed logistically impossible. On May 23, 1959, the North Vietnamese Army established Group 559, a special logistics unit named after the month and year of its creation. Their mission was to create a supply route through Laos to support operations in South Vietnam. Starting with approximately 500 personnel, armed primarily with basic tools like machetes and shovels, they began developing what Americans would later call the Ho Chi Minh Trail, though the Vietnamese referred to it as the Truong Strategic Supply Route. Initially, the trail was not a road but a network of hidden footpaths beneath the jungle canopy. The operation required absolute stealth. Soldiers were instructed to minimize their visibility from the air, avoid daytime cooking that might produce detectable smoke, and maintain operational silence. These early porters carried loads of 50 to 80 pounds on their backs, hiking up to 12 hours daily through challenging mountain terrain. The journey was arduous. Porters battled malaria, which caused more casualties than enemy action in the earth. They contended with leeches, dangerous wildlife, and extreme fatigue from traversing hundreds of miles on limited rations. Despite these challenges, supplies began reaching communist forces in South Vietnam. North Vietnamese leadership recognized that human porters alone could not sustain large-scale military operations. They needed to transport heavier weapons and larger quantities of supplies. The solution came from an unexpected source: bicycles. The North Vietnamese modified standard bicycles, primarily French Peugeot models, into cargo carriers. These modifications included reinforcing frames with bamboo and metal supports, replacing standard tires with solid rubber or reinforced versions to prevent punctures, and extending handlebars for better control. The bicycles were not ridden but pushed, allowing a single porter to transport 300 to 400 pounds of supplies, several times what could be carried on foot. Operating these heavily loaded bicycles on mountain trails required extraordinary physical effort. Porters pushed them up steep inclines in tropical heat and controlled them on dangerous descents where loss of control could be fatal. These bicycle convoys, moving primarily at night to avoid detection, became crucial to early supply operations. As American military involvement increased in the early 1960s, United States advisors were puzzled by the Viet Cong's seemingly endless supplies. Aerial reconnaissance began detecting signs of the trail system, breaks in the canopy, worn paths, but the American military focused on conventional logistics involving highways and motorized convoys, initially underestimated the significance of this primitive supply network. By 1965, when the United States deployed combat troops, the Ho Chi Minh Trail had evolved into a complex logistical network. Group 559 had expanded to tens of thousands of personnel, including combat engineers, support troops, and volunteer youth brigades who maintained and repaired the routes. The trail system had become remarkably sophisticated. It featured multiple parallel routes, allowing traffic to shift when sections were damaged. The network included rest stations, underground facilities, medical stations built into caves, and repair workshops. As American presence escalated, the North Vietnamese began widening sections to accommodate trucks while maintaining bicycle transport for areas impassable to vehicles. The United States responded with massive aerial bombardment. General William Westmoreland recognized that disrupting this supply line was crucial to military success. However, expanding ground operations into Laos and Cambodia risked escalating the conflict with China or the Soviet Union. The solution was an unprecedented air interdiction campaign. Operation Rolling Thunder marked the beginning, but more intensive campaigns followed. The Americans believed that superior firepower could destroy this primitive logistics network. They would soon discover they had gravely underestimated their opponent's resilience. Part 2, 1966. The war had fundamentally changed. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was no longer just a footpath for porters and bicycles. It was evolving into a rough road system capable of supporting motorized transport. Soviet-made trucks were beginning to supplement bicycles on wider sections. The flow of supplies was increasing dramatically. In Saigon and Washington, military planners grew increasingly concerned. To counter this threat, the United States launched one of the most technologically advanced interdiction campaigns in military history. Codenamed Operation Igloo White, this initiative aimed to create an electronic barrier across the jungle. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, believing war could be solved through data and technology, championed this approach. The operation involved dropping thousands of electronic sensors throughout the Laotian jungle. Some were acoustic sensors designed to detect voices or engine sounds. Others were seismic sensors that registered ground vibrations from footsteps or vehicles. These devices transmitted data to aircraft, which relayed information to a computer center at Nakhon Phanom Air Base in Thailand. At this facility, advanced computers for that era processed the sensor data, tracking convoy movements and predicting their locations. Coordinates were then transmitted to bombers for immediate strikes. It represented warfare by algorithm, where technicians could direct attacks on targets hundreds of miles away without ever seeing them directly. The Americans also deployed chemical detection equipment designed to identify human presence through ammonia traces. To military planners, this technology seemed to provide the ultimate advantage, stripping away the enemy's concealment. However, the North Vietnamese quickly adapted. Discovering the sensors, they developed countermeasures. They relocated acoustic sensors and played recorded engine sounds to create false targets, causing American aircraft to bomb empty jungle. They drove livestock along fake trails to trigger seismic sensors and placed containers of urine near sensors to mislead chemical detectors while troops remained safely distant. Vehicle camouflage became increasingly sophisticated. Trucks were painted with disruptive patterns and hidden during daylight in caves or tunnels carved into hillsides. Branches and vegetation were attached to break up vehicle outlines. Drivers operated under strict protocols, driving only at night, using minimal lighting systems. Tiny lamps that illuminated only small sections of road, allowing convoys to move in near total darkness. The greatest threat to these convoys was the AC-130 gunship, equipped with night vision technology and powerful weapons. When these aircraft detected convoys, they could destroy entire columns within minutes. The psychological pressure on drivers was immense. They were often young volunteers maintaining alertness for days through sheer determination, driving through landscapes devastated by constant bombing. Critical to maintaining the trail were the repair crews, including many young volunteers, with significant numbers of women among them. Their task was arguably the most dangerous, rushing to repair bomb damage immediately after strikes, often before delayed fuse bombs detonated. They worked with basic tools to fill craters and clear obstacles, ensuring roads remained passable for night convoys. Their casualty rates were extremely high, yet they persisted with remarkable determination. The North Vietnamese did not merely repair damage, they continuously expanded the network. They created multiple bypass routes, wove tree canopies together for concealment, and built underwater bridges just below river surfaces, invisible from aerial observation but strong enough to support truck traffic. Perhaps most remarkably, they constructed a fuel pipeline. Recognizing that transporting fuel in barrels was inefficient and dangerous, engineers beginning in 1968 started laying plastic pipes from North Vietnam through Laos into the south. The pipeline was buried or concealed along riverbeds, with pumping stations hidden in caves. When sections were damaged by bombing, repairs were completed within hours. Eventually, this pipeline extended thousands of miles, representing an engineering achievement constructed entirely under bombardment. American commanders measured success through statistics. Trucks destroyed, supplies interdicted, enemy casualties. Data showed thousands of vehicles eliminated monthly. Pilots reported successful strikes. Sensors registered hits. By these metrics, the interdiction campaign appeared successful, yet these metrics were misleading. Despite the bombing, supply flow was not stopping, but actually increasing. The trail network's redundancy, combined with effective deception and the determination of repair crews, ensured continuous operation. While Pentagon briefings showed charts of destruction, the North Vietnamese were stockpiling weapons and moving troops southward, preparing for major offensives. Part 3, January 31, 1968. The Tet Offensive erupted across South Vietnam, Communist forces attacked over 100 cities and towns simultaneously, including the United States Embassy in Saigon and the former imperial capital of Hue. The scale of this coordinated assault was only possible because of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Every weapon, every round of ammunition, every supply item used had traveled down that bomb-cratered corridor. Although militarily costly for North Vietnamese forces, Tet achieved a decisive psychological victory, demonstrating that no amount of bombing could isolate the battlefield. The American public began questioning the war's winnability. Yet the conflict continued, and the trail faced its greatest trials ahead. Following Tet, as the United States began gradual withdrawal, the air war over the trail intensified dramatically. President Nixon, seeking to cover American withdrawal and strengthen South Vietnamese forces, authorized unprecedented bombing campaigns. Operations with designations like Commando Hunt transformed the Laotian Panhandle into history's most heavily bombed region. The statistics are staggering. Over 2 million tons of ordnance were dropped on Laos alone, exceeding the total dropped by all nations during World War II. This equated to continuous bombing, a plane load of bombs every 8 minutes, 24 hours daily, for 9 years. Entire mountains were leveled. Jungles were stripped by chemical defoliants. The landscape was transformed into cratered wasteland contaminated with unexploded ordnance. Yet the trail adapted and persisted. It went underground in many sections. The North Vietnamese deployed anti-aircraft defenses extensively, no longer just hiding but actively engaging attacking aircraft. The trail became one of the world's deadliest air defense environments. Surface-to-air missiles were transported through the jungle. Hundreds of American aircraft were lost over the trail. The human cost of maintaining the route was enormous. Estimates suggest over 20,000 personnel died keeping the trail operational, with countless others wounded or lost to disease. Yet for every casualty, replacements stepped forward. For every destroyed bridge, repair crews rebuilt. By 1972, the trail had transformed again. No longer merely a guerrilla supply route, it had become a strategic highway capable of supporting conventional armored warfare. Sections were paved. The fuel pipeline extended deeper into South Vietnam. When North Vietnam launched the Easter Offensive in 1972, they deployed tanks, Soviet-made armor that rolled down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, demonstrating the complete failure of air interdiction efforts. Finally, in 1975, with American forces withdrawn and South Vietnamese forces collapsing, the Ho Chi Minh Trail became the highway of victory. The final offensive to capture Saigon was supplied entirely through this network, now comprising over 12,000 miles of interconnected roads. Columns of trucks, tanks, and artillery moved in daylight, no longer fearing American air power. In 55 days, North Vietnamese forces swept through South Vietnam, entering Saigon on April 30th. The tank that broke through the presidential palace gates had traveled on fuel pumped through the jungle pipeline. Its ammunition had been carried on roads built by volunteers. The victory was not merely military, but logistical, a triumph of the trail. Today, vegetation has reclaimed much of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Bomb craters have become ponds. Forest has regrown over scars. But the trail's legacy endures as testament to a profound lesson. Technology has limitations. The United States deployed the most advanced sensors, computers, and aircraft ever built. They attempted to solve the trail problem through algorithms and explosives. They failed because they were fighting something unquantifiable: human determination. American strategists saw a supply line to be severed. The Vietnamese saw a lifeline for survival. They transformed mountains, rivers, and darkness itself into allies. They defeated electronic surveillance through patience, deception, and manual labor. The Ho Chi Minh Trail story demonstrates how determination can overcome technological superiority. It reminds us that in warfare, the why often matters more than the how. The Americans possessed the how, the advanced weaponry, the sophisticated sensors, but the Vietnamese possessed the why. For that why, they pushed bicycles over mountains, filled craters by hand, and walked through fire to keep their lifeline open. This historical account is based on documented military records and historical research. The Ho Chi Minh Trail remains one of military history's most significant examples of logistics determining strategic outcomes.